Jai Mahamaya Ki Jai. We'll go on to chapter 30 of the Devi Bhagavatam, retold by Ramesh, Menon. The rishis are asking, and King Janamejaya asks Veda Vyasa, Muni, I have heard that both the Devi and Indra killed the Asura Vritra. How can this be, Holy One? Veda Vyasa replied with a smile, Your taste for the Purana grows day by day, O king. Listen then to the legend of the Asura Vritra. All that happens in the three worlds does so by the delusion of Mahamaya. Darkness and light, good and evil, are all her creations, her illusions, which she sends forth and destroys at her will. No creature in Swarga, Bhumi, or Patala is free of the three gunas of Maya. The Devas and the Trimurti themselves are no exceptions. They also fall prey from time to time to an excess of one of the gunas, and thus to selfishness. Why, when they are deluded, even Vishnu and Indra commit treachery and murder. The Prajapati Vishvakarman was the architect of the gods. He was gifted, brilliant, and a great yogin and brahmana. But once arrogant Indra slighted the Prajapati, and an enmity grew up between the two of them. To avenge himself on Indra, Vishvakarman, the cosmic genius, created a wonderful son and called him Trisiraksha Vishvarupa. The boy was handsome past imagining, had three beautiful faces. He used each face for a different task. The first he used to read the Vedas, the second to eat and drink with, especially Amrita, and with the third he studied the universe around him. When he had read the Vedas, drunk Amrita, and seen whatever he wanted to of creation, he decided to sit in tapasya. He renounced every pleasure he had enjoyed, and Trisira sat in Padmasana and began a fervent tapasya. His passions restrained, his mind turned inward upon itself. He became an ascetic. In summer, he performed the searing Panch Agni sadhana. He lit 4 fires around him, and then the sun was a fifth above. Then he suspended himself by his feet from a tree. In winter, he sat in icy streams, often entirely submerged. Soon he did not eat any more. The subtle fire of Trisira's tapasya went scorching through all the world, and Indra and Devaloka grew alarmed. He was afraid that with such a penance, Trisira might even usurp his sovereignty over the three worlds. Moreover, Trisira was Vishvakarman's boy, and Indra had no doubt the moment he was powerful enough, he would come to kill the Deva king. Meanwhile, Trisira shone like a sun, where he sat in meditation. His radiance streamed through the lokas. There are many methods to distract any Muni from tapasya, and the king of the Devas is the master of them all. Through the ages, he has found that the swiftest and most effective means to sway any hermit from his rigor is seduction. Indra summoned the Apsaras, Urvasi, Manaka, Ramba, and some others too. Each one was with an unearthly beauty of charms that not man or Deva had ever resisted. The king of the heavens said to those women, I have a grave task for you, one upon which my very life depends. My fiercest enemy sits in tapasya, such as time has seldom seen. He grows more powerful every day, and soon he will come to kill me. Apsaras, you must seduce him out of his meditation. The Apsaras were willing enough and went straight to that place where Trisira sat motionless, hardly breathing anymore. The nymphs came in bewitching throng and were clad in such flimsy raiment so none of their breathtaking beauty was hidden. They came singing in soft voices and dancing, so even a corpse may have risen to savor their charms. Trisira did not seem to see or hear them. Those enchanters came near him, and he could surely smell their bodies' fragrance that could drive a man out of his mind. Still, he did not stir or even open his eyes or any of his faces. The Apsaras went back to Indra in pique and said, "Lord, this three-faced one is no ordinary Tapasvan. We could not tempt him at all. He is like an incarnation of Agni. His body is like fire. We are afraid that he may burn us to ashes with a look if he opened his eyes. His tapasya is profound, Indra. Beware of him." Indra waved them away, and his alarm mounted. Something had to be done about Trisira. And quickly, Indra muttered to himself, "If he can't be seduced, then he must be killed." He called his Aravata, his white elephant, and flew through the air where Trisira sat upon the mountain. Indra poised himself on the air above the Muni. He felt a pang of conscience when he saw how serene and absorbed Trisira was. The three-fourths faced Tapasvan glowed like a full moon. Where he sat, light flowed from his body in a stream and spumed through the mandalas. For a moment, the Deva was gripped by doubt. How could he kill a rishi who sat in such quiet contemplation? Then he remembered that the hermit below him was Vishvakarma's son, born to be his, Indra's, bane. Drawing a deep breath, Indra summoned his Vajra, the thunderbolt of 1,000 points. Murmuring a mantra, he cast that terrible weapon at Trisira. The Vajra struck Trisira squarely in the chest, and never opening his eyes, the Yogan keeled over where he sat, dead. Indra exulted, but the other rishis of Devaloka were aghast. They cried, "Indra has killed a brilliant and innocent Muni at his Tapasvan. He must pay for this sin." Indra went back to Amravati, but Trisira still glowed brightly where he had fallen. Some days passed, and Indra returned to the scene of the crime. Trisira lay still, yet his body shone. Indra grew anxious that perhaps he was not dead. Just then he saw a woodcutter called Taksha passing near. The Lord of the Devas hailed the man. Indra said to Taksha, "I struck this enemy with my Vajra, and he fell, but his body shines brightly still, and I fear he is not dead. Strike off his head with your axe, friend woodcutter, and then he surely shall not be alive. Do this for me, and I will reward you richly." The woodcutter replied, "Lord, the Muni's neck has 3 heads upon it. It is too thick for my axe to sever. Moreover, I will not cut off a dead man's head. Can't you see, O Indra, the 3-headed one is already dead? Why are you so afraid of him? He is my enemy, and he is dangerous. I feel sure that life still lingers in his body. My lord, he was a Brahmana. You have incurred the sin of Brahmahatya by killing him." Indra said confidently, "I will do prayashchitta for my sins later, but just now I must make sure he is dead. Haven't you heard, O Taksha, that enemies must be killed one way or another?" "I cannot do this vicious thing," said the woodcutter. "The Muni isn't my enemy. If you cut off his head, I will let you have the offering of the head of every beast from every sacrifice of men." Now this was a tempting offer, for any sacrificial offering is auspicious. Taksha thought about it for a moment, then smiling, he stepped up to Trisira's body and with 3 strokes of his axe hewed off the dead rishis' heads. Then the strangest thing happened. Thousands and thousands of birds flew out from those sacred heads. The birds covered the sky in dense, song-brimming flights for a time, then flew off in every direction. Heaving a sigh of relief, Indra returned to Amravati, quite pleased with himself. Taksha also went back to his home. Both of them thought only of what they had gained by killing Trisira. Neither thought of the consequences of what they had done. But when Vishvakarman heard of the murder of his son, he gnashed his teeth and wept. Roar after roar came from him. Then he swore he would create another son to avenge his gentle Trisira. Why, he would have a son who would kill Indra. Vishvakarman lit a fire of yagya and poured dark oblations into it, all the while chanting mantras from the fourth Veda, the occult Atharva. For 8 days he sat before that fire until the flames turned to great slabs of white light. On the 8th night, a splendid young man stood forth from the flames. When Vishvakarman saw the youth, his son, he cried, "My child, you shall be Indra's enemies. Now grow." Like a fire fed with ghee, that youth grew immense. In moments, he was a towering figure before his father, his face shining in the sky like another sun. He was an asura, resplendent and terrible as well. Why, he seemed like Yama himself. And in a voice like doom, he said to his father, "Father, why are your eyes red with weeping? Tell me the cause of your grief, and I will remove it. What else is the sun meant for? Shall I drain the ocean? Shall I crush the mountains into the dust? Shall I keep the sun from rising? Shall I cast the earth deep into the sea of space? Or shall I kill Indra, Yama, and the host of Devaloka for you?" When Vishvakarman heard the love in his stupendous son's voice, he said, "Truly, you are magnificent enough to end my sorrows, my son." His boy said, "Give me a name, father, and tell me how I can quell your grief." "I name you Ritra, my child. You had a brother called Trisira, with 3 wise and blameless faces. Ah, how you would have loved him if you had only had the fortune to know him. He was the gentlest and sagest youth in all creation. He sat in tapasya, and the 3 worlds glowed with his penance. But Indra was afraid of this pure son and struck him dead with his vajra. Not content with that, he had a woodcutter hew off Trisura's heads with his axe. Tears flowed down Vishvakarman's face when he spoke of his dead child. He said grimly, "Indra must die for this son, the sin of Brahma Hatya. Vritra, you must avenge your brother." Vritra growled, and the world shook beneath his feet. Then Vishvakarman, artisan of genius, began to fashion great and fearsome weapons for his son so that he could kill the king of the Devas. He made a veritable armory for his fiery son, great axes, a bow, an inexhaustible quiver, trishulas, and many other weapons. He taught him the mantras for all of the astras and weapons. He made a coat of golden armor for him, light as the breeze and impenetrable. Finally, he wrought a supernal vimana for Rita, which was formed like a cloud and flew quickly as thoughts. Vishvakarman performed the svatyayana over his warrior son to protect him, and then he sent his powerful child to take revenge on Indra. In war, it is natural for an enemy's enemy to become a friend. So the asura, whom Indra and his devas had vanquished and driven down into Patala, came screaming to Vritrasura to join him. Soon, Vishvakarman's son had a huge army to command. Indra's spies brought word swiftly to their king of light about the asura Vritra and his sinister legions. Lord Vishvakarman has performed this to have revenge on you. He has created an asura who is taller than Mount Meru. All the Danavas have flocked to him, and he comes to kill you, O Indra. When Indra's devas heard this in their gleaming Dharma, they were terrified, for they knew that their king had sinned. Dharma had been violated, and punishment would surely follow. Suddenly, other devas came running to their lord in alarm. Evil omens had appeared everywhere. The rooftops were swarmed with birds of night and carrion. At high noon, the howling of midnight's rakshasas rang dismally through the city of light. Strange, ugly women, clad in rough black cloth, went from house to house crying dementedly to the devas, "Leave your houses and flee. Doom is upon you." The fires of sacrifices burned low and billowed with purulent smoke. Many were extinguished suddenly, though there were no breath of wind stirring where they were lit. The Apsaras and Dipastras fell into torpid swoons and dreamt of vile demonesses who shaved their heads and drank their blood. The devas found themselves crying for no reason and could not stop their tears. Huge blood-headed lizards scuttled everywhere. Black comets with tails of fire fell out of the sky, and the sun and the moon were cloaked in ominous halos. Indra trembled. He called for the Deva Guru, Brihaspati, and said, "Winds of death sweep our city, and the very stars fall out of the sky. Evil omens are everywhere. Perform a yagya, O Guru, for our safety." But Brihaspati hung his head and replied, "Lord of the thousand eyes, you committed Brahmahatya when you killed Trisira. I fear retribution for your sin is at hand. Vishvakarma's second son, Vritra, is a fire-born asura, and he is invincible against all the devas. The omens mean just one thing, that Vritra is on his way to kill you." Just then a clamor broke out in the streets, and they saw all the folk of Swarga fleeing in panic in every direction. Indra began to shout commands, summons the Vasus and the Rudras, call the Ashvins and Pusha and Bhaga, Vayu, Kubera, Varuna, Agni, Surya, all of you, arm yourselves, mount your vimanas. The enemy is upon us. Indra mounted Aravata and flew down to a lofty mountain north of the Mansarava. That is a portal between Bhumi and Devaloka. The Deva host followed him in their vimanas and mounted on extraordinary beasts and birds. It was not long before Vritra arrived there as well with his monstrous legions. A tumultuary battle broke out. That sacred mountain and the sky above it were lit up with astra shaktis, serpentines, and other weapons. The armies of darkness and light hewed at each other with clubs and swords and every conceivable weapon. Arms and legs, heads and trunks hewn off fell everywhere, and the howls and screams of the dismembered and the slain echoed all around, starting avalanches that were tinted scarlet for the streams of the blood that flowed. The two armies of millions of warriors, evil and blithe, were locked in a savage contention. It is told that the war lasted 100 human years, which are 2 months and a half by the time of the Devas. Vritrasura was invincible. He mowed down Gandharvas, Kanaras, Yakshas, the great Naga heroes, the warlike Siddhas, and all the weapons. And with all the weapons that his father gave him, he was able to do this. Though they also took heavy toll of the forces of darkness, the Devas grew afraid for their own lives. Varuna was the first to flee, and then Vayu. Yama, Surya, Chandra, Indra himself, and all the army of life turned tail before the terrible Vritra, and the war was lost. The triumphant Asuras came to Vishvakarman in his ashram and prostrated himself to his feet. The son said to his father, "The Devas were vanquished. They have fled. I took Aravata, and Indra ran from me on foot. I have brought you the white elephant as my spoil of war. I did not kill Indra because I have heard one should never kill a man who is terrified and running from a battle. Vishvakarma's sad face lit up with a smile. He said softly, I am proud of you, my heroic son. You have begun to fulfill the destiny for which you were born. He embraced his brilliant boy. My child, you have lightened your father's grief, though you haven't removed it. He paused and then said, now worship Brahma, Vritra, with a great tapasya. Get a boon of immortality from him and then kill Indra. Vanquishing him in the battle is not punishment enough. He is guilty of the vilest Brahmahatya. He must pay for it with his life. Nothing less will do. Nothing else will make our revenge complete or remove my anguish. The Asura Vritra went to Mount Gandhamandana upon the earth. There he bathed in the cold and sacred river, then made a seed of kusa grass for himself and sat upon it in Padma Asana. Slowly he yoked his body and mind, hardly eating, but quieting his breath with pranayama. Soon he did not eat at all, but only drank water, and later Vritra sat entirely absorbed by his tapasya, neither eating or drinking anything, and hardly breathing any more. The subtle fire of his tapasya spiraled through the three worlds, and he shone like a sliver of star upon the mountains. When Indra knew about Vritra's tapasya, he sent all sorts of Gandharvas, yakshas, kinnaras, and apsaras with various magical powers to distract the Asura. But Vritra sat on unmoved and said Vedavyasa to King Janamejaya, Jai Mahamaya ki jai, Vishveshwari Mata ki jai, Bole Baba ki jai.